Hello, and welcome back to Seeking Rents, the podcast. I'm your host, Jason Garcia. I am the publisher of Seeking Rents. That's a newsletter in Florida where we explore the ways big businesses and other special interests influence public policy in this state. So that name, Seeking Rents, comes from a term in economics called rent seeking. And rent seeking is what's happening when someone with lots of wealth and influence, like a big business or a billionaire, uses that wealth and influence to get laws changed in their favor in a way that allows them to capture even more wealth and influence for themselves, usually at the expense of someone else. So there has been just one story dominating Florida politics for the past 5 days or so. It started with a secretive plan drawn up by the Ron DeSantis administration to essentially rip up parts of 9 state parks across Florida in order to install a bunch of recreational facilities like golf courses, hotels, and pickleball courts. It sure seems like the DeSantis administration was hoping to sneak this plan into place too, because the state's Department of Environmental Protection had scheduled meetings to take all of this stuff up simultaneously in public hearings that were going to be announced at the last minute and seemed intentionally hard to attend for folks. But word leaked out ahead of time, and this plan has blown up spectacularly in the governor's face. There have been protests at state parks all over the place. At the same time, it seems like virtually every politician in the state has come out against it and criticized the Department of Environmental Protection for even thinking about doing this, and certainly doing it in such a rushed way. I mean, even all of the states, most of the state's top Republicans have been taking shots at this, including both Rick Scott and Marco Rubio. And journalists around the state right now are currently engaged in what I think can only be described as an absolute feeding frenzy. They're turning up new scoops by the hour, it seems like. This is a story that also keeps getting weirder because it turns out one of the organizations involved, at least with the attempt to build a golf course at a kind of a beloved state park in Southeast Florida, is a national nonprofit that just so happens to be backed by some of the country's biggest conservative billionaires. And it's also one that has worked in the past with Jack Nicklaus, the legendary golfer. And that's pretty interesting because it just so happens that Jack Nicklaus was once involved with a similar attempt to build golf courses in state parks in Florida years ago under the Rick Scott administration. So now Rick Scott gets to sit on the other side of the other side yelling at Ron DeSantis for doing what Rick Scott maybe tried to do a few years back himself. But it's still getting weirder than that too, because now also there's a significantly shadier nonprofit involved as well, and one that seems to have somehow wound up with a former Fox News commentator and popular MAGA World podcaster serving as its spokesperson. I mean, there is so much smoke around this thing; it may as well be a forest fire. So to help see through that, I asked Florida reporter Craig Pittman, the legendary Craig Pittman, to come onto the show for a bit. Craig is a national award-winning environmental writer, and he's the publisher of a bunch of fantastic books, including Oh, Florida and Cattail. He is also the co-host of his own podcast called Welcome to Florida, WTF for short. And he's also one of the journalists that have been following this story. So I thought he'd be a really good person to try and help unravel what exactly is going on here. Before we get to Craig, though, I got to do the plugs. If you haven't already, please think about signing up for a subscription. The easiest way to find us is at seekingrentsfl.com. That'll get all our stories and podcasts emailed straight to your inbox. Everything is free. None of our stories or podcasts are ever going to be behind a paywall, but there is an option to voluntarily pay for a subscription if you can afford it. They help us afford reporting expenses like the cost of public records requests. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get to Craig Pittman. Craig Pittman, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
So I guess I should start off with kind of I guess the main question that's on my mind is what the fuck is going on?
You mean what, the Florida?
Right, exactly.
Well, okay. So back when Rick Scott was governor, he tried something like this. In 2011, he was going to try to push this idea of building golf courses in state parks. There were going to be a Jack Nicklaus golf trail with courses and parks in 5 different parts of Florida. The legislators he got to file the bill, they actually specifically mentioned Jonathan Dickinson State Park would be one of the parks.
Oh, interesting.
And people went bananas. They absolutely went crazy about this and said, no, you won't do this to our parks. Even Arnold Palmer said it was a stupid idea. And within a week, the 2 shell-shocked legislators withdrew the two bills. And Scott tried again to mess around with the parks. He was going to try to make lots of changes, like, for instance, Honeymoon Island State Park. He was going to have them allow RVs in there to camp overnight, which there's no camping in the park now. And that's one of the reasons why it is the most popular park in the whole system. They held a public hearing on this in Dunedin, and 1,000 people came out screaming bloody murder and said, no way, that's our park. How dare you? And they took it as a personal affront. So let's fast forward now to about a week ago, when word got out, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Word got out that Governor DeSantis had pushed the DEP to try and add golf courses to Jonathan Dickinson State Park. 3 of them, 3 golf courses, 2 18-hole courses and a 9-hole course. Hotels, 350-room hotels at Anastasia Island State Park and Topsail Hill State Park up in the Panhandle, and sports amenities at Honeymoon Island, Hillsborough River, and I forget. There's a total of 9 parks that they were going to change. And people went bananas all over again, because what they don't understand is that people feel a personal connection to these parks. They feel like, that's my park. How dare you screw me over like this? That's not what you're supposed to do at a park. You're not supposed to go out there to play golf or play pickleball and 350-room hotels are just totally crazy.
Right.
But the people behind this were trying to push it through secretly. I mean, they had public meetings, not even hearings, but public meetings, for all of them supposed to be on Tuesday at the same time in 9 different places. So there's no way you could be at every one of them. And once again, people have gone nuts over this thing. There have been hundreds of protesters at Jonathan Dickinson, Honeymoon Island, and Anastasia, or maybe it's some of the others, I don't know. And members of both parties have condemned this, rush to get this thing through, the secretiveness of it. And so finally, the nonprofit that pitched the idea to DeSantis to have these golf courses at Jonathan Dickinson, they have officially withdrawn their petition to the DEP, but that still leaves the other stuff, the two hotels, and so we're still not sure what's going to happen with all this. The DEP had to postpone the public meetings because there was such a wave of outrage, and so they're probably going to have that in early September. We'll see what happens. I mean, it seems like something new happens on this every day.
Yeah. I mean, the pace of this reporting by you and others has been sort of phenomenal to watch it play out. I got a couple of questions about that. So the first one, I guess I'll ask, I think you were the first guy to sort of call out that this was coming from the governor's office, if memory serves. And I think that's been pretty clearly borne out by the fact that his comm show clowns are out there trying to put lipstick on this pig every chance they get, right?
Well, and I have to mention, the Tampa Bay Times was the first to officially report that this was going on.
Oh, great.
Their story today says that DeSantis' schedule shows he had a one-on-one meeting with the CEO of this company on April 10th.
That's right. So that's the Folds of Honor guy, the nonprofit behind the golf course stuff.
Who's got some connection with the Nicholas family. So once again, the Nicholas family is involved in this. So
and okay, so tell me, what do you know about sort of the governor's office's involvement in this, and sort of the inference I take away from that is this is not some idea that like bubbled up from park staff or something like that. This is a top down thing. What more can you sort of say about that?
The tipster who first called me about it told me that it was basically a top-down thing, that the governor's office told just a couple of top people at DEP and said, you will do this, you will make it happen, keep it from everybody else, keep it quiet. Even the park managers of the parks involved didn't know this was coming. I mean, they were caught flat-footed just like everybody else. And I don't know this is something I have surmised, but apparently the thing that tripped up the secrecy is that they needed maps, and nobody who was on the inside knew how to make a map. So that's how it got out to the other members of the DEP, who then, I guess, expressed it to some retirees from the DEP, and they started spreading the word. And a guy named Dana Bryan in particular, who used to be the chief ecologist of the whole park system and is now retired, he was tireless in spreading the word about what was going on and what was wrong with it.
They never get you for the murder. They always get you for the tax fraud sort of thing.
There you go. There you go.
It's something mundane that trips you up.
And the crazy thing is, as bad as the golf courses are, the cover up is so much worse that they were trying to hide this thing. It's like, okay, so who was profiting from that? Because that's always the question you have to ask. We're still waiting to figure that one out.
Yeah. And and I want to get to that in just a sec. Although let me ask you, what do you think the reason for the secrecy was? Did they kind of anticipate it was going to blow up like this, or I mean,
they anticipated resistance, but I don't think they anticipated how much resistance. I mean,
yeah,
the column I wrote last week, I pointed out the famous George Santayana quotation about those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it. Well,
right.
guess what? They forgot what happened with Rick Scott, and they should have learned from that. Don't ever try this crap again. And sure enough.
Right. It was really funny to me that you mentioned the Tampa Bay Times has done some great work. I know Max
Mhm.
Chesness has been doing some
Mhm.
awesome stuff. And I remember
Yes, yes.
getting a chuckle at one of the stories midways was Rick Scott with a scathing letter. And it was sort of like
Yeah.
here he gets a chance to play good guy in the same sort of
Yeah. He
situation.
learned his lesson. Why can't anyone else?
Right, exactly. Now, it seems to me there's kind of like two things going on. One is there's like this overall plan to put, a bunch of sort of arguably inappropriate amenities into
Mhm.
9 state parks overall. And then one in particular that seems to be the most grotesque one with golf courses
Yeah.
in Jonathan
Jonathan
Dickinson.
Jonathan Dickinson State
Yeah,
Park, which is the southernmost habitat for the endangered scrub jay.
right.
It's also the home of the famous Trapper Nelson, the wild man of the Loxahatchee. So in my column, I was suggesting the ghost of Trapper Nelson would come back and tan everybody's hide with a canoe
Right.
paddle, starting with the governor. But yeah, the fact that the Nicholas family tried to make this happen before. I mean, the original idea that Rick Scott adopted was from a conversation he had with Jack Nicklaus.
Right.
Nicklaus himself was saying, "I want a legacy, and this golf trail will be my legacy in Florida." And hey, look, there's all this state parkland that's going to waste. Why don't we build it there? And not realizing just because somebody told me the two dirtiest words in Florida are empty land. There's no
Right.
such thing as empty land, and especially in state parks, the land is serving a purpose. It's
Right.
providing habitat, and don't put a golf course on top of it, because golf courses, people have this idea. There's a great line in was the movie Sunshine State, where Alan King is this developer slash golfer, and he refers to a golf course as nature on a leash. Well, it's also nature that's polluted, and nature that's sprayed with pesticide, and nature
Right.
that's messed up in every which way. So yeah, don't confuse a golf course with nature.
And also, I am admittedly not a golfer, but like, it doesn't seem to me to be very hard to find a golf course in Florida already. Like the idea that you
Yes.
need to take a state park for one of these things is
Yeah,
wild.
this is in Jonathan Dickinson is in Martin County. Martin County has 26 golf courses already. So why would the state be
Right.
competing with them? And Florida in general has more golf course holes per capita than any other state. And they're not all doing too well
Right.
financially. I mean,
Right.
a number of them have closed. There's a big fight over one in Miami that closed, where a developer wants to come in and develop it, and the place has
Right.
actually sort of regressed to become wildlife habitats. Now there's a big fight over that. So, it's just amazing to me that nobody involved thought, is this a good idea?
Right.
Especially since the people with Folds of Honor, the one of the two nonprofits involved in this, went to a state senator in Martin County and said, "We'd like to do
That's
this."
right.
And she said, "It's a great idea, but not in Jonathan Dickinson State Park. Don't
Right.
put it there." And then they did the same thing with the county commissioner there, Martin County Commissioner, who also said, "No, this is a terrible idea. Don't build in our state park." Both of them Republicans, and they both saw this is a stupid idea. Don't try this. And yet they pushed ahead with the governor.
It's like a kid whose mom says no, then goes to dad and asks the same question.
Yeah, yeah. The crazy thing to me is DeSantis grew up in Dunedin, so he was right next to Honeymoon Island.
Right.
Surely he heard the stories about people standing up to defend Honeymoon Island. When that Rick Scott thing came up, I went to the public hearing where 1,000 people were there, and there was somebody from the Florida Native Plant Society saying she was going to lay down in front of the bulldozers. There were people talking about linking arms to block any
Wow.
RVs trying to come into the park. I mean, it was 1960s radical talk from
Right.
people in the 2000s who were all
Right.
wearing tassel loafers and blue blazers, but they were upset. They were really angry.
Yeah. Yeah. So one more question about the overall thing. One of the things I'm sort of wondering myself, and I don't know if we know the answer, but was the secrecy designed to get all of this done, or was the secrecy designed to hopefully like tuck the golf courses in with everything else, do you think? Or like I'm wondering how separate are the, like is
I
it
don't
like
know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And no, I don't think anybody knows at this point.
Right.
We're still trying to figure that out. I mean, there's still a lot of reporting going on. I'm
Right.
hopeful that folks like Max Chesney's and others will continue to dig into this and figure out what happened. But, let me just say two things. One is Florida state parks are one of the absolute best things about Florida. They've won
Hmm.
national awards 4 times, which is 3 more than any other state has won.
Oh,
They
wow.
Their tagline is enjoy the real Florida. Well, because they are. That's the real Florida, not this artificial,
Right.
theme park crap. That's where you go find what Florida is really like. And people appreciate that. It's a huge driver for our tourism economy,
Mhm.
and they should get a lot more appreciation than they do. The second thing is, as you know, Governor DeSantis' default mode is secrecy. He's the
Right.
first governor to
Right.
try and make his travel record secret. He's the first one to really put serious roadblocks into the release of public records from his office or public records from any other executive branch office. So, my suspicion is his intent with making this secret was he makes everything secret.
Right. Right.
And in this case, it just really blew up in his face.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so on the golf course stuff specifically, we've alluded to this group field Folds of Honor, and
Folds of
so
honor.
so my understanding of them, this is a major national nonprofit that
Mhm.
I think raises money for veterans. Is that right? Does that sound right?
Yeah,
Uh,
and they're somehow connected with this group called the Tuskegee Dunes,
yeah, this is
who
the
are trying to
sketchiest part of the whole thing.
pay tribute to the Tuskegee Airmen, but their website is it's like the barest bones website I've ever seen.
And like
And
created like yesterday, by the way.
yeah, pretty much.
Right. Uh,
Pretty much.
and so Fields of Honor
Folds of honor.
at Folds of Honor. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
I keep messing that up. Folds of Honor initially approached Gail Harrell, that state senator, that Martin County
Yeah.
commissioner, a year ago with this idea, and then we know Ron DeSantis met with the guy who runs Folds of Honor, but
April
then
10th.
yeah, but then just the other day, this sort of other nonprofit that seems to be Folds of Honor. He's got the same address as them and has no other
Mm-hmm.
credit, but the Tuskegee Dunes.
Yeah.
Do we have any way to like sort out like who's who so far, or is that all still kind
Well,
of
and you could all I don't know. And you could also ask, how did Dan Bongino get involved in this?
right,
Because he's
right.
a Martin County resident. He's the one who posted this thing on his Facebook page saying, "Oh, they're friends of mine, and they say they're withdrawing. They had no idea that people
He's
felt
that
this
angry
strongly about the park."
MAGA podcaster, right?
Yeah, it's like, what? How did you get involved in this? So my suspicion is he was involved a lot more than just
Right.
saying we're pulling it back. I think he was involved maybe from the get go,
Yeah, that came out of left field yesterday where the statement came
or
from him.
right
It's
field,
like, wait, yeah, exactly. Right, right.
far right field.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Came out from fringe right field.
Yes, there you
Um,
go.
the, the I have a working theory I'll run by you, and
Okay.
this is based on nothing more than just like full on like just like poking around and stuff. And I haven't found anything that you and other reporters haven't already
Mm.
turned up. You guys are great, but this Folds of Honor, it seems to be like get a lot of support from conservative billionaires, a lot of folks that matter. So like when you just like poke around with the tax records, you find like Charles Johnson, the San Francisco 49ers, sorry, San Francisco Giants owner, has been a big donor to Folds of Honor. So has James Pallotta, who if I remember correctly, used to be a minority owner of the Celtics, something like that. Also Charles Koch through his Stand Together Foundation. All of these guys are also like they've been big DeSantis donors in the past, and probably more importantly, they're just like big kingmakers when it comes to any Republican politician that would like to be president one day. And we all sort of know Ron DeSantis wants to try again. And so I just kind of my working theory right now is it's just there's so much interest and support. There's so much. Basically, this is a way to sort of do something. Not a favor is the wrong word, but a way to sort of ingratiate yourself with a cause that some of these people that you really want to support you care about. And that's my working theory right
It
now.
could be. A friend of mine named Nadine Smith pointed out to me, I didn't realize this, that there's been this trend in some other places, not in Florida yet, where people will use a nonprofit to get possession of public property and get all
Mhm.
sorts of breaks for it. And then it'll fail in a couple of years. And then a developer who was really behind it all along will step in and take over. And
Right.
that was the plan all along, is to use this sort of Trojan horse thing. I don't know if that's what's going on here, but it's certainly
Man, if you
worth
were doing that, you'd
investigating.
be, you'd be basically taking land out of a state park at that.
Yeah, which is that's a big no-no.
Yeah, that's
In
right.
order to do that, you have to officially declare that
Right.
the state land is surplus and is no longer needed. And I don't think you can claim that about any of this property.
Right, right. What's the next step with this? Where do things stand right now? What happens next?
Well, I think the DEP has to tell us whether they're going to go ahead with the 350 room hotels and the sports facilities that were all part of this whole package. So until we hear from them, we kind of don't know where the state's going to go with this. Personally, I'd like to see DeSantis step up and say, "Hey, everybody, I screwed up. I had no idea. Now I know, and I'm going to do all sorts of things, great things for the state parks because those folks are underpaid and their facilities are falling apart, and we need to do more to support them." I'm not going to hold my breath until he does that, however.
Right. Yeah. I think you laid it on a good point too, that their default mode is secrecy,
Yeah,
and it feeds all this suspicion when you do it that way, right? Like people, it would be wonderful if he would just sort of walk through what happened, explain
yeah,
explain
yeah.
how this
Because
all got to place.
I don't know about you, but whenever my kids were quiet, that's the time I got worried because, and I think that's true for Florida politicians too. Whenever they're not
Right.
telling you what they're doing, they're up to something.
That's right. Wait, let me ask you one last thing, and this is kind of a serious question because I think the talking point that's come out of the administration, and I've heard this from other politicians, particularly Republican politicians, is this idea that we need to do more to make state parks accessible to people, and that this is ultimately like a good thing, in that you want more people experiencing these parks, so they've got more appreciation, and you're building support long term for saving this. You know, I'm not sure that like having people play pickleball in a state park is how
No,
you get them to care about environmental
no,
preservation. But I wonder,
nobody's going out there for pickleball.
yeah,
But
yeah, exactly.
okay, if you want to make them more accessible,
Yeah,
then say that people who live in Florida can get in for free.
right.
I mean, it's like a $5 admission fee. A lot of poor people can't afford that. They'd love to be able to go into the parks. Get rid of the admission fee.
Hmm.
That would do a lot right there.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, well, let's throw that on the agenda at the next meeting instead of paving a few golf
Okay.
courses. So,
Yes, definitely.
all right,
Yeah. Skip
Craig,
the
thank you.
pesticide, make the paying free. Yeah,
Yeah,
there you
exactly,
go.
exactly. All right, well, I didn't expect to solve it today, but I'm glad we did. Craig, thank you for doing this. This was fun and very illuminating, and I'm very interested to see how this ultimately finally ends. Thanks for being here,
Okay.
man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you again to Craig Pittman for joining the show. If you haven't already, make sure to check out some of his books. Cattail is especially good, in my opinion. And definitely give his podcast a listen. Again, that's called Welcome to Florida. WTF is an easy way to remember it, but I'll post a link to the show in the show notes as well. If you haven't already, please think about subscribing. Easiest way to find us is at seekingrentsfl.com. Everything is free, nothing's behind a paywall, but please consider doing a voluntary paid subscription if you've got the means to. Also, subscribe and hit the like button, I guess, if you can, over and over. I don't know, as many times as it lets you hit the like button, just do that. That'd be great. All right. Thank you for listening, and we will see you again very soon.